is a privilege for Hartford Seminary to host this gathering for our friend and colleague Ibrahim, whose home was here at Hartford Seminary for 16 important years. We gather from near and from far, students and colleagues and friends and family, to honor and remember Ibrahim and to give thanks for his life, his friendly, irrepressible, and generous spirit, his enormous contribution to the study of Islam and to Muslim-Christian relations here and around the world. A committee of friends and colleagues of Ibrahim has planned this event, taking it on as a labor of love. The committee includes Ingrid Mattson, Fatma Antar, Ali Antar, Colleen Keyes, and M.T. Winter. David Barrett and Mary Zeman and Marge Lezak, as well as other Hartford Seminary staff, have also happily and tirelessly pitched in. MT, working with the committee, has, as only MT can, created the structure and the flow of this service. Thank you, MT, and thank you to the whole committee. Thank you to the staff, and thank you to our Don McKeever, who brings us our beautiful music today. We're grateful to those who will be participating. Many of you have traveled many a mile to get here to be at this memorial today. And indeed, we're grateful to the participants, but we're grateful to each and all of you. We're glad you are here, and we thank you for your presence. There will be a reception following, to which all are warmly invited. Thank you very much.
We have all minds and hearts in. I'm going to do the call to prayer. My name is the first caller of prayer. That's what my father named me for that. And so in honor of Ibrahim, I'm going to make this call to prayer. But first, before I do that, I just want to say this stage looks beautiful. And I want everybody to... This stage is just an emanation of the love that MT has for Ibrahim. So I'm just very honored to be a part of that love. And so just acknowledge that. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar!
My name is Joe Pace. I was one of Ibrahim's students here at Hartford Seminary, and I found Ibrahim to be among the best of the teachers I've known in my lifetime. He was an exceptionally wonderful teacher who opened the excitement of the field of study to me. He was a gracious man. I know many of you here have benefited and enjoyed his gracious hospitality, being invited perhaps on the spur of the moment to his house for a dinner for about 50 people, which always ended sitting around the room, drinking tea, and engaged in wonderful conversation. And if you were lucky, you were allowed to wander into the stacks of his library. But as you all know, no one was ever allowed to borrow one of his books. Or as Ibrahim would let you know, the greatest libraries in the world were all built from books that had been borrowed at one time or another. Ibrahim, as you all know, was very much a modern-day Ibn Battuta. If you ever saw his passport, it was as thick as this book. Just kidding. But he traveled around the world, and often when he traveled, he would take students with him. And it was my great privilege and great honor to have traveled to, I believe it was 9 different countries with Ibrahim. And I'd like to share just one little incident with you, which for me in many, many ways sums up who Ibrahim was for me, and I think perhaps for many of you also. This was on my first trip to Syria. I made 3 trips to Syria with Ibrahim. And this first trip was during Ramadan, and late one evening, Ibrahim invited me to join him for a smoke at a cafe in the shadow of the Aleppo Citadel. Beautiful place. It was a beautiful evening, and we were sitting there smoking, and of course we went through one pipe fairly quickly. The charcoal burned out, and Ibrahim summoned over a young man with a little bucket of charcoal. The man came, fixed our pipe, relighted it for us, and then kind of stood there, hemming and hawing. It was very clear he was waiting for a tip. And Ibrahim looked at him and he said, "You want a tip?" And the guy said, "Sure." And Ibrahim said, "Well, go ask the Ba'ath Party to give you a tip." And at that, my stomach jumped into my throat. I thought, my gosh, Ibrahim, what in the world have you done? We're going to end up in jail. The secret police are coming for us. And there was this incredibly long, it was probably only 10 seconds, period of silence as the young man stared at Ibrahim and Ibrahim stared at him. And then suddenly the two of them burst into laughter. The man pulled up a chair, sat down, and talked with us for a good 20 minutes or so, and in that 20 minutes or so, I think we perhaps got the most honest assessment of what life was like in Syria from anybody that we encountered in that entire trip. And that one moment was really what Ibrahim was like. He could make friends with strangers in just a moment. He could tease knowledge and information out of anyone, and all the time laughing and absolutely enjoying himself and having the time of his life. I've been asked to read a brief excerpt from Henry Scott Holland, who was canon of St. Paul's Cathedral, London, and he wrote this upon the death of his wife, and I believe this could help set the tone for today for us. I have only slipped away into the next room. I am I, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way you always used to. Put no difference in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, and pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without the ghost of a shadow on it. Life means all that it ever meant. What is this death but a bridge into the next world? Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am but ahead of you, just around the corner, and all is well. I'd like to call on several of Ibrahim's friends, people Ibrahim knew in different ways, and I will introduce them all at once and let them each take turns speaking. Abdullah Antepli, Colleen Keyes, Markham, Norton Mezvinsky, and Mahmoud Ayoub. Abdullah?
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. It is not an easy task to remember Ibrahim, who was more than a friend, more than a professor, more than a scholar. More than any title or any label can explain our relationship, and I'm not unique. I think every student that he met, in his life, in his presence, they love this institution, what this institution stands for, and learned so many different things, and it changed their life in many different ways. Many of us talk about these ideals in our lives, like generosity, being ethical, graciousness, compassionate, and some of us even make graduate studies about it and teach. But very few of us actually are able to live in our lives to the fullest extent possible. Ibrahim was one of those souls who uphold some of those ideals and lived fully and expressed and witnessed to the fullest extent possible. One thing, he was extremely generous. I have never met anybody in my life, and I've been to 54 countries in my young age. I have never met anybody who is as generous as Ibrahim. Not only by his time, by his money, there was something in his presence, in his graciousness, in his way of dealing with people. Everyone, his enemies, people who took away his home, people who come from the descendants of that nation, that political persuasion. He spent years teaching and how angry he is with British colonialism, but this didn't prevent him becoming good friend with Markham. There are a couple of, I spent writing many different papers to read, but instead I couldn't. I thought I would just speak through the Holy Spirit, as my Christian friends say. This is Ibrahim's joke again. Only he, as a faithful Muslim, who can say, Holy Spirit is talking through me. And there are 2 or 3 YouTube videos of Ibrahim that I hope everybody after this, if you don't know him, if you haven't heard him speak, you will be able to speak. One thing that I would like to highlight. In those 3 YouTube videos, I'm surprised he doesn't have many, only 3 of them are there. He expressed most of his life developments, and he tells all along how scarred his family and his soul because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because of how European Jews' arrival to that part of the world has not been a good news for him, for his family, and for his people. He was one of those people, one of the very few actually, that I have seen that took that personal misery. His soul was as scarred as any other Palestinians that I know, but turned something into very constructive. It's easy to say, but very difficult to do. It's easy to say and very, very difficult thing to do, to take that trauma, collective and personal, and turn it into something positive. I witnessed that he had no hate for Jews or Judaism. On the contrary, in his scholarship, in his personal relationship, it's very difficult to do that. I mean, we are having a hard time forgiving people who cross us in a much lighter way. But he was able to do. He was able to forgive, and he was able to humanize the whole experience. In one of those videos, he says, the kind of pain and suffering that I have seen in the eyes of those Polish and Romanian and Hungarian Jews, it was the same pain that I have seen in the eyes of my mom, my father, my aunts, who have been suffering in refugee camps all over the Middle East. I think we very much need in his wisdom, in his presence, not only to remember him, but what he stands for and what he represented for all of us, that we will continue his legacy as a peacemaker, as a bridge builder. He was an extraordinary human being. I am sure he is enjoying his time in the heaven. But all the struggles and the problems that he has facing is still among us, with us. I'm hoping this institution and as us, like his students, we will continue his legacy. Thank you very much.
Ibrahim Abu-Rabi radiated love for and interest in human beings wherever he went. His practice of Arab Islamic hospitality that we've been hearing about, opening his home to any and all, his seeking out conversation with people on the streets of Fez, Istanbul, Lahore, Ramallah, Tel Aviv, Damascus, or Delhi, revealed his big heart, open to the street sweeper as well as the scholar. As Ibrahim's student and friend for 15 years, I traveled with him on several study tours, encompassing 10 countries. And if we'd had our way, there would have been many more. The first time was to his home in Nazareth, and the last time was from Jordan into his hometown, Nazareth, at the side of his sweet wife, Fatima, and his beautiful children, Yasmina and Yusuf, to lay his body to rest in the place of his birth, in a beautiful cemetery that I still see and feel as though I'm there today. Allahu Akbar. The Lord God knows best. He brought Ibrahim close to his ancestral home for the moment of his death. For Ibrahim had been a man of both physical and metaphorical exile, a man and a scholar of exilic consciousness, one who guided so many students through intellectual migrations to new places of knowledge and consciousness. The role of the public intellectual, the role of the wandering teacher, and the sober mystic were the roles that Ibrahim Abu-Rabi played so touchingly in the lives of students and colleagues. One of Ibrahim's intellectual mentors was the Iranian scholar Ali Shariati, who universalized Muhammad's migration, peace be upon him, from Mecca to Medina, into the idea of man as a choice, a struggle, a constant becoming. He is an infinite migration, a migration within himself, from clay to God. He is a migrant within his own soul. These are the words of Shariati. I see Ibrahim Abu-Rabi in these words. Ibrahim was to many an enigma, but that is because he was constantly becoming a migrant within his own soul. Ibrahim was indeed an exile who crossed borders of all types, broke barriers of thought and experience, who embodied the meaning of the hauntingly beautiful words of a 12th century monk from Saxony. And those words are these. The man who finds his homeland sweet is still a tender beginner. He to whom every soil is as his native one is already strong. But he is perfect to whom the entire world is as a foreign land. The tender soul has fixed his love on one spot in the world. The strong man has extended his love to all places. And the perfect man has extinguished his. This was Ibrahim Abu-Rabi.
Assalamu alaikum. I had the privilege of serving as Ibrahim's academic dean from 2001 to 2007. And during that time, President Heidi Hadsell and I would often find ourselves with our bags packed, meandering around this world of ours. And it might have been Pakistan, or it might have been Indonesia, it might have been Turkey, or it might have been India, but it was somewhere that I was staying. And I found myself in an elevator with Ibrahim, and I would watch as Ibrahim starts a conversation with a complete stranger. With a big smile, he would ask about the stranger's children and where he came from. And then once he discovered that the guest was an Egyptian, he would explain with a big smile on his face how great Egyptians are at making desserts and how lousy they are at fighting wars. And then as the elevator reached the right floor, Ibrahim would then just stride away, leaving the poor gentleman amused and at the same time bemused. Our elevator guest had encountered Ibrahim, a man of enormous energy and intellect, a man of wit and hospitality. Like all of us, Ibrahim lived with complexity. He was a Palestinian who grew up in Nazareth, which he used to explain to Christian groups is the reason why he's closer to Jesus than all of us. And he always acknowledged his debt to his Catholic schooling. He was the Israeli citizen who could speak Hebrew and was very conscious of the pain of the region. He was the US citizen who appreciated the benefits and freedoms of that country, yet needed some overseas travel to, quote, enable him to breathe again, as he worried about the positions the government was taking around the world. In this respect, he enjoyed his move to Canada. Such a child of the world was bound to bring some baggage, and Ibrahim had his fair share. And many a time, as dean of the seminary, I would sit with Ibrahim talking through this or that issue, often finding that the presenting issue was not really what bothered him. It was deeper, more puzzling, more painful. Thanks to his languages, his scholarship took us to places that the English world has never been. He was the one who knew what was really being said. He had, as Joe Pace has already alluded to, the best library of anyone I knew. The basement of his home would be turned into an impressive collection of books. And deeply fascinated by economic, cultural and political factors, he would offer his distinctive analysis of global and religious dynamics. Probably one of his favourite roles while he served at the seminary was as editor of the Muslim World. He valued the prestigious nature of that journal and worked hard to find interesting writers. He was the most gracious and generous of hosts. He would open his home to students and colleagues, and with his wife Fatma and his children, he brought an extravagant, generous hospitality to America. He enjoyed working at Hartford Seminary, although he found it frustrating when he was trying to translate the term seminary into Arabic. He was always a chapel. He believed in prayer. He had deep faith in God. He was a poet who wore his feelings on his sleeve. He could make people laugh and smile. His sensitivity was part of his deep spirituality. He had an amazing empathetic capacity. My personal debt to Ibrahim is enormous. Our debt to Ibrahim is enormous. Ibrahim, you will be missed greatly.
Ibrahim Abu-Rabi was my good friend for about 20 years. I first met him when he came to the Hartford Seminary in Connecticut as a faculty. Our friendship and working together relationship steadily increased during the years that I knew him. One of the reasons we first became friends was our mutual concern about the unfortunate Arab-Israeli conflict. Both Ibrahim and I, he, a Palestinian from Nazareth, with family members who had been uprooted by the conflict, and I, from a Jewish religious background, both of us were concerned about the antagonism between too many Arabs, especially Palestinians, and Jews that had developed because of the conflict. We were both determined to do whatever we could, admittedly in small ways, to address this problem positively. Connected to this concern of ours was our desire to do what little we could to promote serious dialogue and better relations between Jews and Arabs. Ibrahim was, as this audience knows well, a wonderful human being. He loved people, was passionate about human rights, was outgoing and humble at the same time. He had an uncanny ability to relate positively, as has already been stated, to many kinds of people. He had a great curiosity for learning and was a vociferous reader. His knowledge was wide-ranging and extremely deep in those areas in which he specialized. Ibrahim was a magnificent teacher. He inspired students in and out of the classroom. He taught students young and older the subject matter of specific courses and much more. His scholarly contributions, especially in various categories of Islamic thought, were enormous. His studies of the writings and ideas of contemporary thinkers and scholars from Arabic-speaking areas, published under the titles Intellectual Origins of Islamic Resurgence in the Modern World and Contemporary Arab Thought, are seminal works on the intellectual history of the modern Middle East. The Blackwell Companion to Contemporary Islamic Thought, which he edited, is a major work. His more recent writings about the Sufi Turkish Islamic theologian Said Nursi are informative and in-depth. His recent 2010 publication, The Contemporary Arab Reader on Political Islam, is valuable for many reasons, one of which, as Ibrahim said in an interview, is that it lets Islamists speak for themselves. Ibrahim's contributions to interfaith dialogue, indeed interhuman relations, was amazing and constitute a major contribution. Thanks to Ibrahim, I was able to share somewhat in this good work, and I am only one of many who can say the same thing about what Ibrahim did with and for them. I could here relate tens of stories that illustrate how Ibrahim did this and how he involved me personally in this good work. I shall mention briefly only two. One, Ibrahim introduced me, as well as many others, to Sheikh Farfour and the Al-Fad Institute, a major Islamic institution in Damascus, Syria. I was able to discuss Jews and Judaism, as well as other related topics, numerous times in Syria with Al-Fatah faculty, students, and other Syrians at meetings arranged by Ibrahim. The discussions were positive and constructive and will hopefully continue. Two, a few years ago, Ibrahim asked me to join a small group of people he took to Pakistan for discussions with different individuals and groups, academic, religion, and others in that country. One of our many interfaith meetings was in Rawalpindi, just outside of Islamabad. It was at a Christian center in Rawalpindi, as I recall, the only one of its kind in Pakistan. We met in an auditorium that was filled, except for the few of us, with Christians, Pakistani Christians, who had come from many places in Pakistan. Although the number of Christians in Pakistan is small in relationship to the whole population, those who came this day included professionals, a few government officials, farmers, and others. The meeting consisted of individual members of those in attendance standing and telling us their experiences as Christians living in Pakistan. Some talked about how well they were treated. Others said that they as Christians were not so well treated. After the meeting, at the Pakistani lunch, one of the individuals who spoke at the meeting, a man probably in his 30s from a small town, came up to me with his wife. He patted me on the shoulder and he asked if he could talk with me. I told him, of course. He said that he had never met a Jew before and wanted to talk to me for that reason. We talked, and after we talked, he was happy, his wife was happy, I was happy, and the people around us who had heard the conversation, all of them were happy as well. For me, this one incident was in itself worth the whole trip to Pakistan, and I told Ibrahim this, and I thanked him for taking me along on the trip. I conclude by noting that instead of spending Thursday and Friday, the beginning of the high holy days for Jews, with my Orthodox Chabad congregation in New York City, praying in my own way for forgiveness of sins, and contemplating how I should do things better during the coming year, I went to Canada to participate in 2 sessions devoted to remembering Ibrahim. Before I went to Canada, and I know better now, but before I went to Canada, I thought that thinking about Ibrahim and recalling who he was and what he did in his unfortunately short life, although saddening as it may be, does inspire me and others to follow his lead and attempt to be humanly positive and constructive. I thought that would be the case before I went to Canada. After I was there, I knew it was the case. Ibrahim was my good friend, and I learned so much from him. Certainly about Islam and Muslims, but also about humanity. Thank you so much for having me.
To God do we belong, and to Him we shall return. I knew Ibrahim shortly after he graduated from Temple University. He graduated, I think, about 2 years before I went there in 1988. He was teaching in Virginia, and I knew there was an opening here, and David Kern, the late friend and wonderful man who was here, I wrote to David and suggested that they accept Ibrahim as one of their faculty, and eventually Ibrahim came here. Ibrahim and I had a very special relationship. He was a brother, a wonderful man to whom I could talk, with whom I could joke, as I could not with most other people. We both liked also to tell dirty jokes, and we both enjoyed them. We traveled together to Indonesia and Malaysia, and I remember one time I gave a talk at a Catholic university and they gave me some money. So I called Ibrahim, I said, look, I got some money now, we will all go for lunch, courtesy of the Pope. and so we did go for lunch, and Ibrahim was in a jovial mood for a change that day. So wherever we went, he would just cry out to people, "Apa kabar? How are you?" in Indonesian. And I said, "Ibrahim, don't." He said, no, I like to know how they are doing. Ibrahim also was a humanist. I knew him, and together we helped Iraqi refugees who were living in Yogyakarta in Indonesia, and eventually he got at least one of them a job in Malaysia. Ibrahim liked to help, but without ostentation. For him to help others was something we must all do as a matter of course, because others need the help that we can offer. He told me many times I want to invite you to Edmonton. And I taught in Edmonton before for 1 year, and I told him, Ibrahim, I lived in Edmonton for a year, so I served my country, Canada, and I am a Canadian citizen, by living in an isolated place like Edmonton for a whole year. Edmonton was one of the few cities in Canada where you can get into your car and drive in any direction for 3 hours and not come across anybody or anything. But he enjoyed it because Edmonton has a vibrant Arab community which vexed him sometimes and pleased him at other times, but he was part of it. I discovered lately, listening to one of the YouTube videos, that Ibrahim was also a poet, and not just a poet, a very sensitive and beautiful poet. I'm sure that Ibrahim's goodness will make him acceptable to God, and he is happy waiting for us all to join him at one time or another. My thoughts and sympathies go to his kids, whom I met and played with a number of times. To grow up without a father as a child is not easy. His wife also was very dependent on him. He was a good father, a good husband, and a good friend. May God have mercy on him. I would like, if you allow me, to conclude with reciting Surah Al-Fatiha for Ibrahim, and anybody who feels so inclined, please join me. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. Thank you very much. May God be with you.
Hello everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Rabbi al-Adawiyya of Basra, who lived in the 8th century, is without doubt the most popular and influential revered Muslim women and a central figure in the Sufi tradition. She was born nearly 500 years before Rumi, and although it is rarely said, she perhaps, more than any other poet, influenced his writings. Rabbi al-Adawiyya grew up in a part of ancient Mesopotamia that is now Iraq. She was the 4th daughter, and that's why her father named her Rabba. Rabba means the 4th, of impoverished parents. And the story connected with her birth tells of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, appearing to her father in a dream to tell him that his daughter would be revered. And here is one of Rabbi al-Adawiyya's poems. In my soul, there is a temple, a shrine, a mosque, a church, where I kneel. Prayer should bring us to an altar where no walls or names exist. Is there not a region of love where the sovereignty is illumined nothing, where ecstasy gets poured into itself and becomes lost, where the wing is fully alive but has no mind or body? In my soul, there is a temple, a shrine, a mosque, a church that dissolve, in God. Thank you.
We are all the same, and we have one maker. We are the property of a single person. Whoever made one of us made all of us. Listen to the stars. Listen to their harmonious address. See what wisdom has emblazed on the decree of its light. Altogether, they start to speak with the tongue of truth. They address the majesty of the all-powerful, all-glorious one's sovereignty. We are, each of us, light-scattering proofs of the existence of our Maker. We are witnesses, both to his unity and his power. We are subtle miracles, gilding the faces of the skies for the angels to gaze upon. We are the innumerable attentive eyes of the heavens, which watch the earth, which study paradise. We are the innumerable exquisite fruits, which the hand of wisdom of the all-glorious and all-beauteous one has fastened to the celestial portion of the tree of creation, to all the branches of the Milky Way. For the inhabitants of heaven, we are, each of us, a traveling mosque, a spinning house, a lofty home. Each is an illuminating lamp, a mighty ship, an airplane. We are each of us a miracle of power, a wonder of creative art, created by the powerful one of perfection, the all-wise one of glory. We are each of us in ecstasy, a member of the mighty circle of the Milky Way.
I was here when Ibrahim joined the faculty, and from day one we became fast friends. He shared with me his poems and his mystical bent. And I would like to read a poem now. I can't believe I'm doing this. It's very personal and it's not easy. But it shares an aspect of this man whom I loved that I want you to know. It was written in October 8th, 2001, in the aftermath of 9/11. And its title is To Empty Winter. One day when I was in primary school, our smiling priest ran after me asking, "My son, what is your religion?" I answered I was a Muslim, a follower of peace. The priest gave me a warm hug, and that made me feel secure in my religion. When I met NT for the first time, she hugged me the same way. She embraced me as though she had been waiting patiently for the coming of the man from Nazareth. And once again, I felt secure in my religion. For years, the Spirit of Jesus of Nazareth has filled me up with mercy and compassion. I've never felt the need for conversion, but understood the necessity of absorption. That is, absorbing the infinite mercy of the divine. This is my religion. One night before my waking moment, I dreamt I was tossed back and forth between the smiling face of the priest of my primary school and the anguished eyes of NT. I hung out my soul in the balance between smile and anguish. And luckily, I've gained an anguished smile. In this day and age, when violence seems to be the norm in our world, an anguished smile is needed to wake you up from the follies of human beings. NT and I share many things in common. One of these is our love for India. India is the site of the beautiful Taj Mahal, built by a bereaved husband to his wife, the crown of beauty. Since I have been little, I built a Taj Mahal for Jesus in my heart. The compassion of Jesus unites.